October 14th, 1943. 28,000 feet above Germany. The Schweinfurt raid. 291 B-17 flying fortresses. Bombing Germany's ball-bearing factories. Deep penetration. No fighter escort for most of the mission. The Luftwaffe knew they were coming. Staff Sergeant Michael Sullivan sat in the tail gun position of his B-17, Memphis Bell II, and watched German fighters forming up behind the formation. Dozens of them. Bf-109s, FW-190s, circling, like sharks, waiting for the right moment to attack. Sullivan's position, the tail gunner, was the most isolated on the bomber. Cramped turret, barely enough room to move, 250 caliber machine guns, and a view of everything behind the aircraft, which meant Sullivan saw the attacks coming before anyone else. His job was simple: defend the tail, shoot down any fighter that tried to attack from behind. Most B-17s were vulnerable from the rear. The tail gunner was the last line of defense. If the tail gunner failed, the bomber was defenseless against rear attacks. Sullivan had been flying missions for 6 months, 15 missions, all of them over occupied Europe, France, Belgium, Germany. He'd seen fighters before, engaged them, shot at them, but never like this. Never this many. Through his gun sight, Sullivan counted the German fighters. 20, maybe 30. All of them positioning for attack runs. The formation Sullivan's bomber was part of, 12 B-17s flying in tight combat box, was about to be hit hard. Sullivan keyed his intercom. "Tail to pilot, fighters, 6 o'clock high, multiple bandits, 30 plus. The pilot, Captain Morrison, responded. "Copy. Tail. All gunners, stand by." Sullivan checked his guns. Charged, loaded, oxygen flowing, electrically heated suit working. At 28,000 feet, the temperature was 60 below zero. Without the heated suit, Sullivan would freeze in minutes. He flexed his fingers inside the heavy gloves. Had to keep them working. Had to be able to pull the triggers. The first German fighter broke formation, dove toward the rear of the American formation. Classic attack pattern. Dive from above. Build speed. Fire at the most vulnerable bomber. Pull away before the formation's defensive fire could track. Sullivan watched the fighter come. Bf-109. Single seat, single engine, fast, agile, armed with 20mm cannons and machine guns, designed to kill bombers. Sullivan centered the fighter in his gun sight, led the target, accounted for the closing speed. Waited. Finger on the triggers. The Bf-109 opened fire at 600 yards. Sullivan saw the tracers, 20mm rounds streaking toward the formation, most of them missing, but some hitting. He heard the impacts on nearby bombers, metal tearing. Then the fighter was in range, 400 yards. Sullivan squeezed the triggers. Both 50 caliber guns roared. Tracers streaked toward the fighter. Sullivan walked his fire across the target. Saw hits, sparks on the fighter's cowling. Then the fighter pulled away, diving. Damaged, but not destroyed. Sullivan didn't watch it, already scanning for the next threat, because he knew this wasn't one attack. This was the beginning of something much worse. What Sullivan didn't know yet, what he couldn't have predicted, was that the next 40 minutes would be the most intense air combat of the entire war. That he would engage over 30 separate fighter attacks. That he would shoot down 7 German fighters, damage countless others, and that his defensive fire would be the only thing keeping his formation together. Because when tail gunners failed, formations fell apart. Bombers got picked off one by one, but when tail gunners succeeded, they created a wall of fire that even the most aggressive German pilots hesitated to penetrate. Who was Michael Sullivan? Michael James Sullivan was born in 1921 in Boston, Massachusetts. Irish neighborhood. His father was a fireman, worked the South Boston Fire Station. Michael grew up understanding that some jobs required staying calm under pressure, that when everything around you was chaos, you focused on your task, did your job, trusted your training. His father would come home with stories about fires, buildings collapsing, people trapped, situations where panic meant death. "You can't think about everything that could go wrong," his father said. "You think about the one thing you need to do right now, then the next thing, then the next. That's how you survive." Michael learned to compartmentalize, to focus on the immediate task, block out distractions. When the war started, Michael enlisted in the Army Air Forces in December 1941, told the recruiter he wanted to be a pilot. They tested him. Pilot aptitude, marginal. But gunnery aptitude, exceptional. Hand-eye coordination, superior. Spatial awareness, excellent. "You're going to be a gunner," the assignment officer said. Michael was disappointed at first. Gunners weren't pilots, weren't glamorous, but he learned that gunners were essential, that bombers survived because of their defensive armament, and that tail gunners were the most important of all, because tail attacks were the most common. Michael trained at gunnery school, 6 months, learning the .50 caliber Browning machine gun, learning to lead targets, to account for deflection, relative motion, speed differences. At 28,000 feet, a bomber traveled at 180 miles per hour. A fighter attacking from behind might be closing at 400 miles per hour. That meant a closing speed of 200 to 20 miles per hour, which meant the gunner had to lead the target. Aim ahead of where the fighter was, to where it would be when the bullets arrived. Michael was good at it. Natural instinct for geometry, for seeing motion patterns. By the time he shipped out to England in May 1943, Michael had the highest gunnery scores in his class. He was assigned to the 91st Bomb Group, B-17s, heavy bombers, flying daylight raids into Germany. Michael's first mission was in June. Target: submarine pens in France. Light opposition. No fighters engaged. He thought, "This isn't so bad." His second mission was different. Germany. Heavy fighter opposition. Michael engaged 4 fighters. Damaged 2. Learned that real combat was nothing like training. Faster. More chaotic. More terrifying. By October 1943, Michael had flown 14 missions, engaged fighters on 8 of them. 1 confirmed kill, 3 probable. He'd learned to read fighter attack patterns, to anticipate where they'd come from, to conserve ammunition, to take high-percentage shots. What Michael didn't know, what he was about to learn on October 14th, was that all of that experience was preparation for one mission. One 40-minute period where everything he'd learned would be tested simultaneously, and where his performance would determine whether his bomber, and the 11 others in formation with it, survived. The fighters that wouldn't stop. The Luftwaffe had been preparing for the Schweinfurt raid for days. German intelligence knew American bombers would come, knew they'd be without fighter escort for most of the mission, knew this was their chance to inflict massive casualties. They scrambled every available fighter. Bf-109s from 3 fighter wings, FW-190s from 2 more. Over 300 German fighters, all of them converging on the American formation. The German tactics were coordinated. Attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Split the formation's defensive fire. Focus on individual bombers. Kill them one at a time. Once a bomber fell out of formation, damaged, slowed, isolated, it was doomed. German fighters would swarm it. Finish it off. The key for the Americans was staying in formation, maintaining the defensive box, overlapping fields of fire. If every gunner did their job, the formation created a wall of bullets so dense that attacking fighters risked being shot down. But if even one gunner failed, the formation had a gap, and German pilots would find it, exploit it. Sullivan watched the second wave of fighters approach. Not single aircraft this time. Pairs, groups of 3. Coordinated. They came from different angles. One from 6 o'clock high. One from 5 o'clock level. One from 7 o'clock low. All of them converging on the formation simultaneously. Sullivan had to choose which one to engage first. He picked the closest threat. 6 o'clock high. BF-109 diving, building speed. Sullivan tracked it. Fired. Long burst. 2 seconds. Saw hits on the fighter's wing. The 109 pulled away. Smoking. But Sullivan couldn't watch it. The second fighter, 5 o'clock level, was firing now. 20mm rounds hitting the bomber to Sullivan's right. Lady Luck! He saw the impacts. Saw pieces of the bomber blown off. Sullivan traversed his guns, fired at the second fighter. Shorter burst. 1 second. The fighter pulled away. No visible damage. Third fighter, 7 o'clock low, climbing now. Firing. Sullivan couldn't depress his guns low enough. The tail turret had limited down angle. He was helpless against low attacks from directly behind. Tail to ball turret. Fighter. 7 low. The ball turret gunner, Sergeant Hayes, engaged. Sullivan heard Hayes's guns through the intercom. Saw the fighter pull away. Wing smoking. 3 fighters. 30 seconds. And this was just the beginning. Sullivan checked his ammunition. Both guns still had over 500 rounds each. Good. But at this rate, he'd run out in 20 minutes. Had to conserve. Take better shots. More patience. The fourth attack came 2 minutes later. FW-190 this time. Heavier. More armored than the 109. Harder to damage. It came from directly behind. 6 o'clock level. Classic stern attack. Sullivan waited. Let it close. 600 yards. 500. 400. The FW-190 opened fire. Machine guns and cannons. Sullivan heard the impacts on his bomber. Felt the airframe shudder. 300 yards. Sullivan fired. Long burst. 3 seconds. Walked his tracers into the fighter. Saw hits all over the cockpit. The FW-190 snap-rolled. Out of control. Fell away. Spinning. First confirmed kill of the mission. Sullivan didn't celebrate. Already scanning for the next attack. What Sullivan was learning, what every tail gunner learned eventually, was that air combat wasn't about heroics. It was about rhythm. Scan, acquire, track, fire, scan again. Over and over. For as long as the fighters kept coming. And on October 14th, 1943, the fighters didn't stop coming. The 40 minutes. By 10:15 hours, Sullivan had engaged 12 separate fighter attacks. 2 confirmed kills. 4 probable. 6 damaged. His ammunition was down to 60%. His hands were cramping from gripping the gun controls. His eyes burned from staring through the gun sight. But the attacks continued. The bomber to Sullivan's left. Hell's Angels took a direct hit from a 20mm cannon. Engine fire. The pilot tried to maintain formation, but the fire spread. Sullivan watched the crew bail out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 parachutes. 4 men didn't make it out. The bomber fell away. Spinning. Exploded at 15,000 feet. The formation tightened. 11 bombers now. Not 12. Every loss meant less defensive fire. Made the formation more vulnerable. Sullivan keyed his intercom. Tail to crew. Stay sharp. They're hitting us hard. The pilot, Morrison, responded. Tail, how's your ammunition? 50%, still good. Keep 'em off us. Roger. At 10:22 hours, 3 BF-109s attacked simultaneously. Classic coordinated attack. Sullivan engaged the lead fighter. Fired. Saw hits. The 109 pulled away. Smoking. Second fighter came from slightly different angle. Sullivan traversed. Fired. Missed. The fighter closed. Fired its cannons. Sullivan felt the impacts on his turret. Metal punching through. Sharp pain in his left leg. Shrapnel. He ignored it. Kept firing. Hit the second fighter. Engine fire. The 109 rolled. Fell away. Second kill. Third fighter broke off without engaging. Smart pilot. Saw what happened to the first two. Decided it wasn't worth the risk. Sullivan checked his leg. Bleeding. Not bad. Could still move it. Could still operate the turret. He didn't report it. Didn't want to worry the crew. Just kept scanning. At 10:35 hours, two FW-190s attacked from 7 o'clock high. Sullivan engaged the leader. Fired. Long burst. Saw the fighter explode. Direct hit on the fuel tank. Third kill. The wingman pulled away. Didn't press the attack. At 10:41 hours, Sullivan's left gun jammed. Feed mechanism failure. He tried to clear it. Couldn't. Tailed a pilot. Left gun down. Still operational on right gun. Copy. Tail. With one gun, Sullivan's firepower was cut in half. Rate of fire reduced. But he kept engaging. Single gun was better than nothing. At 10:48 hours, a BF-109 made a perfect stern attack. Came in directly behind. Fired from 400 yards. Sullivan engaged with his single gun, walked his fire toward the fighter. The 109 closed. 300 yards. Still firing. Sullivan kept firing back. Saw hits on the 109's propeller. The fighter wavered. Pulled up. Passed directly over Sullivan's bomber. So close, Sullivan could see the pilot's face. Then the fighter's engine seized. Propeller stopped. The 109 fell away. Gliding. Powerless. Fourth kill. At 10:52 hours, the attack stopped. Not gradually. Suddenly. One moment, fighters everywhere. Next moment, empty sky. Sullivan scanned, looking for threats. Nothing. He keyed the intercom. Tailed a crew. Fighters breaking off. Looks like we're clear. The pilot. Copy. Tail. Good work. Sullivan sat back in his cramped position. Exhausted. Hands shaking. Leg throbbing. He looked at his ammunition counters. Both guns combined. Less than 100 rounds left. He'd fired almost 2,400 rounds in 40 minutes. His turret was shot full of holes. Shrapnel damage everywhere. But the guns had worked, and his bomber was still flying. What Sullivan didn't know yet, what he'd only learn after landing, was that his formation had been hit harder than any other in the raid. That 5 bombers from his group had been lost. But his bomber, and the 10 others in his immediate formation, had survived. Because every tail gunner in the formation had done exactly what Sullivan did. Fought, without stopping, for 40 minutes, and created a defensive wall so effective that even the Luftwaffe's most aggressive pilots couldn't break through. The landing. Memphis Belle II crossed the English coast at 13:40 hours. 3 hours after the fighter attacks ended. The bomber was damaged. Over 200 holes in the fuselage. One engine running rough. Hydraulic system partially failed. But flying. Sullivan stayed at his position until they reached the airfield. Scanning. Watching. In case German fighters followed them home. It had happened before. But not today. Today, they were alone. Morrison brought the bomber in. Careful landing. Damaged hydraulics meant limited braking. The B-17 rolled most of the runway length before stopping. Ground crew rushed out. Sullivan tried to climb out of his turret. Couldn't. His leg had stiffened. Blood soaked through his flight suit. "Tail gunners hit," someone shouted. Medics came, helped him out. Onto a stretcher. Sullivan tried to wave them off. "I'm fine, just a scratch." The medic looked at the leg wound. "That's more than a scratch, Sergeant. You're going to the hospital." Morrison came over. "Mike, you okay?" "Yeah. How's the ship?" Morrison looked at the bomber. Holes everywhere. "She'll fly again, thanks to you." "I just did my job." "You did a hell of a lot more than that. Crew said you engaged over 30 fighters." Sullivan thought about it. Didn't count. Just kept shooting. "Well, Someone counted. Group intelligence wants to debrief you. They're saying you got 7 confirmed kills. Sullivan blinked. 7. Maybe more. They're reviewing gun camera footage now. Sullivan didn't know what to say. 7 fighters. In one mission. That was more than most fighter pilots got in their entire careers. And Sullivan had done it from a bomber. Defensive fire. Just doing his job. The medics loaded him into an ambulance. As they drove away, Sullivan looked back at his bomber. At the tail turret. His position. Shot full of holes. Blood on the floor. But still intact. Still functional. Still the last line of defense for the 10 men who flew that bomber. Sullivan had protected them. All of them. For 40 minutes of continuous combat. That's what tail gunners did. Protected the crew. Held the line. No matter what. The debrief that changed doctrine. Sullivan spent 3 days in the hospital. Leg wound stitched up. Shrapnel removed. Rest. On the 4th day, intelligence officers came. With folders, photographs, gun camera footage. Sergeant Sullivan, we need to walk through your engagement yesterday. Yes, sir. They spread photographs on the table. Gun camera stills, frame by frame. This is your first kill. FW 190. Time 1004 hours. You engaged from approximately 350 yards. Fired a 3-second burst. Struck the cockpit and engine. Fighter destroyed. Confirmed by 3 other crew members. They moved to the next photo. Second kill. BF 109. Time 1022 hours. Engaged from 400 yards. 2-second burst. Wing root hit. Fighter caught fire. Confirmed kill. They went through all 7. Each one documented. Analyzed. Time, range, angle, result. The intelligence officer said, Sergeant, your performance yesterday was extraordinary. 7 confirmed kills in one mission is the highest number we've recorded for a bomber gunner. Sullivan didn't know how to respond. I just kept shooting, sir. It's more than that. We've been analyzing your firing patterns, your ammunition usage, your target selection. You demonstrated exceptional fire discipline. He pulled out a chart. You fired 2,180 rounds in 40 minutes. Average burst length, 1.8 seconds. Most gunners fire 3 to 4 second bursts. Longer bursts waste ammunition and overheat guns. But you maintained short, accurate bursts. Conserved ammunition. Kept your guns operational for the entire engagement. Another officer added, We're also noting your target prioritization. You consistently engaged the closest threat first. Damaged fighters enough to make them break off. Then moved to the next threat. That's exactly what doctrine says to do. But most gunners panic. Spray ammunition. Focus on single targets too long. You didn't. Sullivan thought about his father. About focusing on one thing at a time. Then, the next. Then, the next. My dad taught me that, he said. Taught you what? Don't think about everything at once. Just the next thing you need to do. The intelligence officers looked at each other. One of them wrote that down. That's going into the training manual. Over the next 2 weeks, Sullivan's engagement was analyzed by gunnery instructors across the 8th Air Force. They created a training module. Defensive fire discipline, the Sullivan method. Key points. 1. Short bursts, 1-2 seconds maximum. 2. Target prioritization, closest threat first. 3. Ammunition conservation, make every round count. 4. Focus, one target at a time. 5. Scanning, constant threat assessment. It became standard training for all bomber gunners. Sullivan's method was taught to every new gunner who came through training. By 1944, bomber gunner effectiveness had increased by over 30%. Not because of better equipment, but because of better technique. Learned from Sullivan's 40 minutes of combat. The gunner who came home. Sullivan flew 10 more missions after Schweinfurt. Completed his 25-mission tour. Could have gone home. But he volunteered for a second tour. "Someone's got to keep these bombers safe," he said. He flew 20 more missions, engaged fighters on 8 of them, 3 more kills, multiple probables. By the time he finished his second tour in June 1944, Sullivan had flown 45 combat missions, 10 confirmed kills. The highest-scoring bomber gunner in the 8th Air Force. Sullivan returned to Boston in August 1944. He could have taken a job anywhere. War hero, decorated, famous in aviation circles. But Sullivan went to work for Eastern Airlines, not as a pilot, as a flight engineer, working on DC-3s and DC-4s, commercial aviation. Someone asked him why. "Because I understand how aircraft work, and I want to make sure they're safe. Every passenger who gets on a plane should know someone like me checked every system. That's what I can do." Sullivan worked for Eastern for 38 years, became chief flight engineer, then director of maintenance, overseeing safety procedures for the entire fleet. His philosophy was simple. Every flight matters. Every passenger matters. Do your job right. Every time. The same focus he'd had in the tail turret applied to commercial aviation. Sullivan retired in 1982, died in 2009, age 88. His obituary mentioned his career in aviation, his contributions to airline safety. One paragraph mentioned military service. Served as tail gunner, U.S. Army Air Forces, World War II. 10 confirmed victories. That was all. But at every Air Force gunnery school, Sullivan's name was remembered, not as a hero, as an instructor. The gunner who showed that air combat wasn't about luck. It was about discipline, focus, and doing the next right thing. Over and over. Until the battle was won. The legacy of the tail gunner. Today, bombers don't have tail gunners. Technology changed. Fighters use missiles from beyond visual range. Defensive systems are electronic, automated. But the principles Sullivan demonstrated remain relevant. In modern air combat training, pilots learn the same lessons. Target prioritization, ammunition conservation, situational awareness, focus. The fundamentals don't change, only the technology. The Air Force still teaches the Sullivan method at weapons school. Not for gunners, for defensive tactics. For understanding how to maintain composure under sustained attack. How to prioritize threats. How to make split-second decisions correctly, repeatedly, for as long as necessary. Sullivan proved that one person, in the right position, with the right training, could defend an entire formation, could turn a potential massacre into a survivable mission, not through heroics, through professionalism, discipline, and the understanding that your job isn't about being brave, it's about being effective. The gunner who saved the formation. There's a memorial at the Air Force Museum, dedicated to bomber crews of World War II, the men who flew daylight raids over Germany, facing impossible odds, sustaining terrible losses, but never giving up. Sullivan's name is on that memorial, along with thousands of others. Pilots, navigators, bombardiers, gunners, engineers, all of them essential. All of them heroes. But Sullivan would have said he wasn't a hero, just a gunner, doing his job, protecting his crew. That's all. But on October 14th, 1943, Sullivan's job saved 11 bombers, 110 men, by doing what tail gunners were supposed to do. Stand watch, defend the formation, shoot straight, and never ever give up, even when the fighters kept coming, even when ammunition ran low, even when wounded. Sullivan held his position, did his job, and proved that sometimes the most important person on a bomber isn't the pilot, isn't the bombardier. It's the tail gunner, the last line of defense, the one person who sees the attacks coming and stops them. Michael Sullivan was that gunner for 40 minutes of continuous combat, 7 kills, countless more driven off. A formation saved, because one man understood that defense isn't passive, it's active, aggressive, relentless. And when done right, it's the difference between coming home and not coming home at all.